Hey folks, I'm talking today about economic problems and Jupiter-Saturn conjunctions. We have right now in the sky, this is the way the planets are looking right now on March 17th, 2020. It might look like Jupiter and Saturn are far apart, but they're actually only a few degrees, about 7 degrees apart here. Jupiter at 28 and Saturn, Jupiter 28 Sagittarius, Saturn at 5 degrees of Capricorn. So this puts them just a couple degrees apart here, as you can see, like 7 degrees. And we're seeing some major stock market corrections. Again, it shows a correction with, what they call like a bull market, with when things get very inflated. Then it corrects with what they call the bear market. I'm not an expert in these things, by the way, but the last Jupiter-Saturn conjunction that we had was in early 2000, and it went into Aries and then also into Taurus for a couple years. We had Jupiter and Saturn joined and interacting and sort of dancing around. And we had a similar kind of thing, which was a sort of precursor to the stock market, to the .com bubble sort of bursting. This couple years of Saturn, and I say couple years because they get close and then they pass because they go retrograde. They kind of stay in contact for a couple years, they approach, and then Jupiter might go retrograde, then they both kind of go retrograde again because Saturn is ahead of it. Then Jupiter kind of goes like this. Then Jupiter kind of goes up past it. Then Jupiter goes retrograde past it. And they kind of go back and forth like this for a while. As we can see, that happened here in 2000. And this, like if we go back, we could see Jupiter and Saturn were both retrograde. See, they were about 15 degrees apart here with Jupiter behind, right? See how close they were. This was even into 1999. They're about 15 degrees apart, right? Then we keep going forward. You see this is now into 2000. Jupiter's getting closer. Or no, actually now they go retrograde again. Then Jupiter sort of catches up, 13 and 20. This was in the middle of 2000. They hit almost exact conjunction here in May 2000. So again, they're right joined May 26, 2000. And then in early Sidereal Taurus, again, they're kind of right on top of each other. And so this continued where this was the big .com, when the .com bubble burst in 2000. And you see Jupiter and Saturn just kind of dancing around each other this way for a while. Now this was the end of 2000. This was December 2000. They had been together for about a year by that time. Again, if we go back to the previous year, they were 17 degrees apart, but they were still in the same Rashi here, right? So you can see how Saturn keeps and Jupiter keep going forward. This is by month. See, monthly, they're still together. Even then they're finally kind of broke apart here by the middle of 2001. They kind of totally separate, and Jupiter and they're not in the same signs anymore. So again, we're in that phase right now where they're pretty close. And if I run this forward even months forward, you'll see now this was by the middle of May, they're both retrograde. Middle of June, they're both still retrograde. They're both still retrograde in July, although Jupiter has gone back into Sagittarius. And again, we keep going forward. Jupiter then goes back in the end of this year. Then next year, you can see Jupiter's passing. Then Jupiter's going to go retrograde past it. It'll go, retrograde again into 2021. So again, this is a month at a time. So right now, one of the things that I'm aware of that's up for us all is this Jupiter Saturn conjunction, and that retrograde, that potential retrograde, or that obvious retrograde motion that's happening here, and how this is something that we need to notice, especially, like, as I say, with stock market and things like that, where we have where we're seeing the financial implications of the difficulties in our world now, and how some corrections are taking place, and these connections taking place are definitely a similar kind of result. In 2000, again, what we had was the internet bubble. What happened is, at the end of 99 into 2000, there was a lot of speculation, 98, 99 into 2000. I lived in San Francisco at the time, lived in the Bay Area, and there was, everything in the world just being a .com, which is just an internet address. And angel investors would just throw money at it like crazy. Speculation was off the charts. It was just insane with all of the, speculation that was going on. We now, and then we saw the, that sort of bubble burst where, I don't remember the exact things that happened, but just that realizing that things were overvalued, and that this over-evaluation was very problematic, and it was going to eventually catch up with all of us. So overnight, that really went from boom to bust. And I remember in the Bay Area at that time, it was, people working at these .coms that really weren't doing anything. They were just empty kind of paper tigers. And I wasn't working in that industry. I was doing something that was actually tangible. But a lot of the economy, especially in that area, because it was driven by Silicon Valley and all like that, really shifted and really changed. I remember the rent in my building where I was living, the rents were just ridiculous. And they didn't go to half, but they went, maybe if it was $2,500 for a studio apartment, it dropped to about, $1,500, $1,700 overnight, right? And all of those companies, their valuation just plummeted. So we're in a similar astrological situation right now, where we're here. Saturn, if we run this forward by weeks, put it here. You see, by this time next week, by the 23rd, Mars will be in Capricorn. Then Jupiter goes into Capricorn. So it's also Capricorn where Jupiter's debilitated. Jupiter has that quality of speculation and of valuation, and the wealth as a concept, like a hopeful concept, like we'll find wealth. That's Jupiter. And so you see, if we go through the weeks, they're pretty close. So Jupiter's going to run right up to Saturn. They're much closer than they were in 2000 at the same time. And in fact, that distance that we were seeing in 2000, they were about this far away, maybe, this was like 13 degrees. No, this was 19 degrees at the end of last year. Jupiter's been closing the gap ever since. So even when when Saturn went into Capricorn in January, and at the end of January, Jupiter was 12 degrees behind. Now Jupiter, catching up, he's only 7 degrees behind, and he's going to catch up, get very close before he turns retrograde. So they get right on top of each other here. This is May. By then, Saturn turns retrograde, and then by the next week, so does Jupiter. So they go retrograde 3 or 4 degrees from each other. Again, you see Jupiter moves a little faster, but Jupiter then goes back in early July. Saturn slows down and stays in Capricorn. Then they start to separate again. So again, this is now in October. And then Jupiter goes in again, and he catches him at the end of this year in December. So again, we're looking for quite a while, and then through this is through the early part of next year. Jupiter really kind of keeps going, and even goes into Aquarius by this time next year. Or no, not quite, but by April of next year, Jupiter will go into Aquarius. He actually flies through Capricorn pretty fast, which is good news. But so again, we could see for the next year or so, especially, there's going to be quite a bit of this financial difficulty and the corrections. Again, in the stock market, and even when people say, "Well, I don't play the stocks, I don't have the stock market," it's a kind of bellwether of our fiscal health responsibility. In some ways, it's overstated because its biggest effect is that these are the institutions that sort of prop up a lot of the economy. The institutions that prop up the banking system and all that other stuff. And when those things get challenged and challenging, then we have this this kind of correction. And again, Jupiter, Saturn, you can see why Saturn and Jupiter, when they come together, they're going to do that. They're going to bring corrections. So they've been close anyway. They joined loosely together in Capricorn and Sagittarius last year, from November until January of this year. And now we're getting close to where even within a couple of weeks, they're going to be in the same sign and very close. So we're seeing the same kind of moves that we saw in 2000. And it started in January of 2000. The market started losing a lot of volume. And then there was a big correction February 11th of 2020, where even an even larger correction took place, where it was like the stock market, quote, collapse or plunge of 2000 February 11th, 2020. I think it was at about 12,000, and it lost quite a bit of that. Do I have the? Okay, I don't have the exact thing here, but anyway, so we're seeing the same. We're seeing the same kind of thing. February 11th, stocks plummet. It fell 218 points. That was 2% of the market, which, again, so that's not as much as we're seeing now. We're seeing a lot more, especially in the last couple last couple weeks. But the last week or so, we're definitely seeing just 2,000 point drops day after day. And I wasn't watching the numbers, but we're definitely getting, we're definitely in this free fall with the stock market right now. And this Jupiter Saturn is definitely significant of that. And we're seeing things like, there are warnings that the market could crash. Some experts are saying, that it's not finished. It could go another 16 to 25%, which, again, the thing that's scary about this, I'm not worried about what my 401ks and all that. That's not the scary part. The scary part is the the banking system and the financial system, the fiat capital system that's propping all this stuff up. And, I'm not an economist, but all of the uneasiness that has been created by obviously the coronavirus and the uncertainty and things getting shut down, and the measures that the administration in the US has been taken to try to ease that are not easing because the factors are still there. There's still people making runs at the stores and doing all this stuff, and people aren't going back to work anytime soon in several industries, hard hit. Not to mention the fact that, and I think one of the biggest things as well, is that there is a huge, tax giveaway in 2018, 1.2 trillion. No, I'm sorry, 1.6 trillion or 7 trillion, almost $2 trillion basically pulled out of the economy and given as a tax break. These are the kinds of reserves that the country uses to bail itself out of difficult things like this. What's very hard to figure is, where are we going to get the cash to take care of these industries that are getting decimated? And then the heck with the industries, but the people. We don't have the money to give to the people. We took it out of the economy a couple years ago with a tax break. Anyway, difficult. This is shown astrologically, and as I'm saying and sort of predicting that for this year, we should look at a rough ride. And again, it's a corrective. These are corrective measures because the market was, spending money that it doesn't have, so to speak. This fiat capital, it's all this speculation and this, again, spending money we don't have, by the way, and speculating about what the future is going to be, unchecked growth. Well, then all it takes is something like this to come and undermine this scenario, and all of these corrections come. And so this is a lot of what, I just wanted to bring this up because this Jupiter Saturn is a signature of difficult financial stocks, especially with the stock market, and financial corrections come. It's a signature for that. And, by the way, I've also been looking at Bitcoin, which a lot of people had seen as, again, was going to be the sort of hedge against stock markets and fiat capital. And basically, Bitcoin is another commodity that's being traded like the stock. It goes up and down with the market. So again, to think that Bitcoin has been anything other than that, it did have an independent rise for a while, especially when that big thing happened several years ago. But then it fell back and started to track just like a commodity that's traded rather than a currency. Now, I'm not going to get into Bitcoin so much here, but people who wonder about that, I definitely thought that I definitely didn't think that Bitcoin was going to be the thing that others had thought. By the way, when we talk about the Great Depression, there were definite signatures that happened at that time, and it was definitely a different time, and it was not these kinds of signatures in the Great Depression. We had other things that were indicating when the stock started to fall, and the astrological signatures as well, which maybe I'll talk about here real soon. But especially as it relates to what we're experiencing now, this is a big theme. And like I say, this Jupiter Saturn is big in as a signature for these kinds of things. And just to look, looks like all of the cryptocurrencies are sort of tanking. I just looked here. And, again, one of the things to know is so far, all the cryptocurrencies, they've all sort of traded like a commodity, like something else that's traded in the stock market. I've always been skeptical because eventually the cryptocurrency itself has to have inherent value. And it doesn't unless everybody, first of all, unless you can use it for things. So far, Bitcoin itself is not really a currency, which means you can't buy stuff with it. The only thing you can do with it now is trade it like a commodity and speculate with it. And it's been a speculation. It's been an investment, not a currency. And again, it's only as valuable as the fiat currency that backs it up, which means Bitcoin is valuable in dollars or euro. It's not valuable in and of itself because you can't trade it for anything except dollars or other currencies. Now, that doesn't mean it's always going to be that way, especially if the world one day starts to use Bitcoin and use that as a currency. But that's different than other things like gold and silver and at least what the fiat currency used to be backed by. One of the problems with currency now is that it's not backed by the gold standard or anything of inherent value. That's why our monetary system now is just a house of cards, because it's not backed by anything substantive. And it's just inflated by bankers trying to inflate the value, et cetera, et cetera. But Bitcoin is even further down. Even gold doesn't have inherent value anymore because it's not like we make things with it. It has some, but not like it used to. And cryptocurrency is even further down the inherent value because it's not something. Even things like, grains or, other kinds of commodities have inherent value. Means you can take the seed and plant it in the ground. You can take gold and silver and make things with it. That's why people used to trade gold pieces or silver pieces, because the thing itself had value. Now, none of the money has inherent value. The paper it's written on isn't worth anything. And when you get to things like cryptocurrency, it's even less because its value comes from the fiat capital, the dollars and the euros that back it. Anyway, I'm not an expert on these things, but I understand them fundamentally. And what people would say about Bitcoin, I brought this up because people are saying it's just the beginning of a one world currency. I don't know what it is, maybe, but people had thought that Bitcoin was going to be like a one world currency, or some kind of cryptocurrency was going to be where things are moving. If that were the case, this is what the cryptocurrency people have been waiting for. Let's see all the markets crash. Let's see them tank. And then Bitcoin is going to be more valuable. It doesn't happen. It's never happened yet. As these fiat currencies crash, Bitcoin goes down. It's just being traded like another speculation. It's just speculation. So, anyway, I'm not a financial expert, so I'm not going to get into that too much, but I do understand these things conceptually and I track them. And so I just wanted to do this to talk about Jupiter, Saturn, to give this case study of how we have this correction going on. And yeah, this was from 1930. This was like the stock market. This was like the Great Depression kind of thing. It started with K2, Rahu, Jupiter, and other things like that. So, but this is where we are right now. And in comparison to, this is where we were when we had this was a previous Jupiter, Saturn, when we had the .com correction, very recent one. And now we have it here. So anyway, I hope everyone is doing okay. And so, talking about specific things like about the price of oil, Saudi Arabia and Russia driving down the price of crude. Again, these are the kind of maneuvers that we see, that we're seeing, that really started to hurt the market last week, because in addition to coronavirus fears, that was already there, making people nervous. Then this big move with Saudi and Russia driving in a price war over oil. And now it's continued this last week with the coronavirus scare, and it's just kind of spiraling. So Susan said it'll never be the same. We'll learn to share more. Things are getting corrected now, and we'll see how it goes on the other side of this. But right now, this is where we're at. And, we should expect this. Hopefully, these corrective moves are going to get us on the right track with more fiscal responsibility. And I hope we don't just spend, what was depressing to me, and I think was probably a bad move. As soon as the stock market started to tank last week, we came and gave $1.5 trillion to the stock to support the currency. $1.5 trillion. Then slash interest rates even more. There's nowhere left to go. It's bottomed out now. Sure would have been nice to have that 1.5 trillion in the pockets of ordinary people. You'll never see that, though. And this is the stuff that's we just take it culturally. So again, these are the kinds of things that hopefully whatever is left of where things are going, which, we're going to get through this. Human beings are going to get through the quarantining and the weird stuff, and it's going to hopefully put us on more sound fiscal responsibility after these growing pains. But right now, that's where we are. So, I hope this was at least a little, this was informative. It's not optimistic or hopeful in that sense, but these sorts of corrections are necessary. And what it really reveals, it reveals those who are just propped up by greed, and those industries and businesses that are propped up by this greed and these greedy policies. And we need to let this greed die. We need to let this system of greed just peter out and put in place fiscal responsibility. And hopefully these things that are happening right now will lead to literally a revolution where we insist that this preposterous Wall Street speculation, legalized gambling with the world's currency and the world's value is forever outlawed. Again, this is it's unbelievable. The world bankers and that allow this crap to continue, where they take our money and the sweat and fruit of our labor and just gamble with it and take more and more and more unlimited, ridiculous greed, policies that do nothing but support this system of greed. And what they do in the process is risk all of our gains. And then when they destroy it, we bail them out. The government bails them out because they own the government. This is why I've been saying for a long time, as much as people act like, because I speak harshly of the president, who is, at least president of the United States, who is not honest, who has all kinds of problems. He's not even close to the biggest problem. The biggest problem is the systems itself, the policies and the system of corruption and greed where they all kind of work with each other, and it all needs to be destroyed. And again, how far do we have to go? How much pain do we have to endure before this happens? And so again, raising the debt ceiling, printing money, quantitative easing, all of these things are just playing with paper money that doesn't really exist. It's not backed up by anything. And eventually that house of cards has to collapse. It did in 2008, and we rushed to support it and then let it get just as bad as it is now. And Trump did nothing but make it worse, particularly that tax cut that happened in 2018. It took almost $2 trillion out of our economy. That's like our reserve. He could have taken that and invested it in infrastructure, roads, high-speed rail, give backs to the people, healthcare, all kinds of things that money could have been used for, that gets back into the economy and circulates throughout the economy. Instead, it was given as a tax break to, quote, businesses, but it was mainly to wealthy people, got most of it, and they then went and bought back stocks and pulled pulled the value out of the economy. So now we don't have that backup. It's like eating your seed corn. It's like shooting your bullets. You've fired the bullets now. You don't have any left in the gun. At least that was a reserve. And it was a product of all of our hard work, all of our efforts. And again, if you don't know this is what happened, I'm sorry. If you think, oh, you're just speaking bad about Trump, you're just a liberal. Again, if this is what you're thinking, you're just not educated. This is what happened. And he's not the first one who did it. George Bush did a bigger one when Bush was president, and Barack Obama made them permanent with the help of Joe Biden. So again, I don't like any of them. Barack Obama, in order to get Obamacare passed, made the Bush tax cut permanent. Bush tax cuts permanent. This is what pissed me off about Barack Obama and forever tarnished Barack Obama. And he did it as a way to get Obamacare through, as a caveat to the Republicans. Well, we'll make the Bush tax cuts permanent if you pass Obamacare. And the one cheerleading that more than anybody was Joe Biden. So I don't like any of them. They're all doing it. And since then, it's just been, the economy's been gutted in this regard. These ridiculous tax cuts that aren't in line with anything reasonable. And we, even in spite of that, we still had a lot of reserve. We still had a lot of reserve. And again, the Trump tax cut in 2018 pulled that out, gutted that. If the middle class saw any of it, it was barely any, and they saw hardly any. They saw a little bit up front. It was front loaded, so it made the regular people feel like they got a break. So he gave them a little break. He gave the 1% of 1% a huge break, and even the middle class part of the tax cut goes away after about 5 years. It's minuscule. It's non-existent. So it was a way to appease people. See, I got a little extra money. Yeah, this year you got an extra what? $500. Do you know what the average person, what the average wealthiest person got? Something like, $60 million tax break or something like that for certain individuals who certainly didn't need it. All that came out of the economy. So this kind of stuff is just, why we're kind of out of what the market is trying to correct at this point. This is why we don't have any, this is why there's danger right now. Similar thing happened again at the end of 2000, or I'm sorry, in early 2000, 1999 to 2000. All this floated capital. Again, the capital gets floated this way, and there's nothing backing it up. And then suddenly, again, Saturn, Jupiter comes and it gets real. Saturn, Jupiter comes and it gets real, and then we make the correction. That's what happened then. And right now, this is the kind of state of the correction. Now the correction is something like this. All these tax breaks after we bailed out the system in 2009, 2008, 2009, 12 years ago. By the way, that was the last Jupiter cycle. I talked about that not long ago. Bailed out the system. Since then, we just kind of opened the gates again slowly. Again, it doesn't happen all at once. We start chipping away at the regulations that were put in place, Dodd-Frank and all of that. We start chipping away at that over 12 years. Then we get this other huge tax cut on top of those tax cuts that happened before. Again, and of course the market goes crazy because all they're doing is gambling. All the market is gambling that the money is going to be worth more. They're just gambling that it's going to keep going up. That's the whole thing with the stock market is I'm gambling that it's going to keep going up. As soon as it feels like it's not going to keep going up, okay, I want my money. It's as simple as this. Do I think I'm going to make more? If I do, then I'm going to put more in. If I think I'm not going to make more, I'm taking it out. So now everybody's going, oops, I better take it out now because it's going to do nothing but go down. So then you have a run. And so this is kind of like a similar thing that happened with the previous transit here. We're here right now, Saturn, Jupiter in Capricorn. Before we were here in 2000, 2001. Saturn, Jupiter, this was into 2001. And even into 2000, it started with Saturn, Jupiter next to each other. So anyway, hopefully we'll have some corrections. We'll get, and this will be an opportunity to reset our financial systems and whatnot. So anyway, I hope people enjoyed this, and you take care.